Who is Cynthia Jane Moss? This is an overview timeline of Cynthia Moss's life. We will get into further detail about her in the next slides. Cynthia Jane Moss was born in New York on July 24, 1940. In 1962, she attended college, which she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. In 1964, she was hired as a news researcher and reporter for Newsweek. In 1967, Cynthia requested a 5-month leave absence to travel the world. She was a tourist in Africa for 2 to 3 months, and that was her life's turning point. Today, in 2020, Cynthia Moss is known to be an American ethologist, conservationist, wildlife researcher, and author. So you're probably wondering, how did Cynthia's wildlife journey begin? And it began in 1967 when she was determined to travel the world and was one of Africa's tourists. Little did she know this trip would change her life. Cynthia met Dr. Ian Douglas Hamilton, who at the time was a British elephant researcher. Dr. Hamilton inspired Cynthia's interest on elephants. She quit her New York City job and lifestyle and moved to Africa to become Dr. Hamilton's research assistant. So what is the Amboseli Elephant Research Project? In 1972, Cynthia was encouraged by ecologist David Jonah Weston to study the last undisturbed elephant herd in Africa. This herd lived in Amboseli National Park in Kenya. In September of 1972, Cynthia partnered with Harvey Crowe's ecologist and began the Amboseli Research Project. Their mission was to catalog pictures of the elephants, which would aid them in keeping track of and recognizing different elephants. How did Cynthia and Echo meet? In 1974, Cynthia and Harvey put radio collars on female elephants in hopes to find matriarchs from different parts of the park to determine their movements and distribution. They then visited Longing Swamp and encountered the first group of elephants. A radio collar was secured on the oldest elephant of the group, whom was named Echo due to the sounds the collar was making. Cynthia Moss has lived in Africa for about 40 years now, and throughout those years she has concentrated her research studies on demography, behavior, social organization, and population dynamics of the African elephants of Amboseli. Cynthia Moss, along with Dr. Hamilton, discovered that elephants could be identified by their ears because no two elephants' ear shapes or combinations of markings and veins were alike. As Moss continued her research on elephants, it was obvious that they have an odd nose, pointy teeth, and were unable to groom one another. The studies and findings of Moss and her team are reported and summarized in the Amboseli Elephants, a long-term perspective on a long-lived mammal. Chapter 12 of the book discusses elephants' reproduction rate, and it was concluded that they reproduce very slowly. Females give birth at least every 4 years. According to Chapter 13 of the book, it was found that elephants are very much like primates because they live in social groups that can fission and fusion. In fact, according to Chapter 11 of the book, although cognition of elephants has been less studied compared to that of monkeys, persuasive arguments exist for considering elephants' minds when pondering selective pressures that have shaped our own primate social and emotional sophistication. Chapter 14 discussed that elephants have long, eventful childhoods. Lastly, Chapter 16 discussed that elephants also acquire a considerable amount of ecological and social knowledge to guide their families both in space and in interactions with others.